Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnut, Neye Ojira Da, Medinde Ojira Po Kwesi Rad Nehem Pata Akan. Amammere Maruka Etipi Mu Ojira Po. That means greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Ojira Day, Purification Day. My name is Ojira Po Kwesi Rad Nehem Pata Akan. Ojira Po of the Aakhuamu Nation in North America. Yet I'll say we thank you once again for tuning in to the show. We're going to place some links in the chat room for the information that we will be going over tonight. And for those who are new to the shows, we have 3 shows on a weekly basis. On Joada, or Mondays, we have Akan Nanasom, ancient, authentic, Akan Ancestral Religion. And we deal with, we're in the midst of a 11-part series right now on that particular show, dealing with the Obosom, the Obosom, the deities, the spirit forces in nature that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern the Akan 7-day week, and also govern the Okra and the Okrawa, the soul, divine consciousness of the Akan, male and female, divinities that dwell with us, that guide us throughout our lives, the Obosom that dwells within our head region and so forth. So we're in the midst of that 11-part series. We did part 9 last night for the Obosom Ya, who's the Obosom who governs the planet Ya, also governs, which is so-called Uranus, governs the magnetosphere of the Earth, governs your magnetosphere, your electromagnetic field, and so forth, also connected with the lung complex, and governs royal sovereignty protection, wielding your electromagnetic energy in an independent, protective fashion for your spirit body, for yourself. So we went into detail about her last night. Next week will be Abba, the Obosom Abba, also called Nekabet, in ancient Kamit, called Oba in the Yoruba tradition, Ayaba and Bodun. So that's part 10. And actually it's an 11-part series. We start off with the introduction in the first part, but then the 11 parts are actually the 11 Obosom. So we're in the midst of that. We've gone through 8 of them, and then we have 3 more. So we're dealing with ancient, authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joada on Monday night. On Egua, Wednesday nights, Eguada, which is Marketplace Day on Wednesday nights, Awukuda, or Akuada, we have our Marketplace show. We have individuals who come on talking about their organizations, institutions, businesses that serve the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community, the African black community, their products and services that serve us in a positive fashion, impact us in a positive fashion, but also maintain our ancestral values in the context of their product, their service, their organization, their institution, and so forth. So we've had a number of individuals come on to the show to talk about their businesses and share with the community. And we're also in the midst of our Aakhuamu economic development model operation. So we are in week number 4 with regard to that. You go to our website, and I'll put the link in the chat room right now. The Aakhuamu page on the website, OKOM. When you go to the Aakhuamu page, you can download the Aakhuamu Economic Development Model, our publication, where we delineate the philosophy undergirding our economic model for development for our people. The strategy is based on and rooted in starving the beast to feed the pride. So we starve the white beast of our resources, reallocate those resources to our businesses, organizations, and institutions. We have targeted 1 business per week, and we're doing this for 52 weeks. 1 business, organization, or institution in our community per week for 52 weeks. We are in week 4. So the first week was in Kingu Health, owned by Dr. Afivi Adiro, who's a naturopathic physician. She received support from the community, and Yerase for supporting her organization. And what we're doing is we're not talking about a separate additional source of revenue. We're talking about making an assessment on a weekly basis, determine what level of funds that you waste with white businesses, money that you don't need to spend, that you don't need to dispense to these white businesses. Starve that beef, take those same funds that you would have wasted at Burger King or McDonald's or Chipotle or Starbucks or at 7-Eleven purchasing things or lottery tickets or whatever it is. Make an assessment, make that determination, take that $5 or $10 or $20 that you typically have recognized that you have wasted with white businesses through the course of a week, and starve that white beef and reallocate those funds to the business of the week. If 1,000 people take $10 away from Chipotle or Starbucks or whatever through the course of Monday through Friday and make a decision to reallocate those funds to the business of the week, if 1,000 people did that, of course, that would be a $10,000 infusion of capital into a black-owned business. So therefore, an Afurakani man, Afuraitkaitnut woman, or a family who owns a business, organization, educational institution, whatever their structure is, and receiving an infusion of capital by starving the white beast of that $10,000, because definitely they don't need our $10,000 to support their white family. These spirits of disorder don't need our money. They're just robbing us of our money, sucking the blood of our community. So we starve that white beast to reallocate those funds to feed the pride. So a $10,000 infusion of capital into a business will help them, of course, to stay open, expand their services, hire more Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, serve the community in a greater capacity. So the first week, we asked everyone to support the first business on the list, which was in Kingu Health, owned by Dr. Afivi Adiro, a naturopathic physician. She informed us, the people, and she thanked everybody for sending donations, accessing services, and so forth. The second week was our institution, Akanland, our educational institution of learning and training and healing and employment and opportunity, entrepreneurship, and so forth, and Yerase for individuals who starved the beast and reallocated those funds to purchase our softcover books and make a donation to our fundraising drive to establish a permanent headquarters in the Washington, D.C. area for our institution. All of the books we publish and broadcast and everything we do is born of our institution. So we want to establish a permanent space so that we can expand our class offerings throughout the course of the week. We'll also live stream classes for people who are not in the area. We also have an employment opportunities through the publishing arm. We will have the publishing arm based in the institution as well. And, of course, we already have the entrepreneurship piece. If people would like to distribute our softcover books, purchase them for 30% off wholesale, and then you can sell them, of course, retail. And we have some people who are already engaged in that process, and you, of course, are an independent entrepreneur working for yourself, engaged in that process. So, I'll say for those who participated and those who continue to support our work. The third business of the week, or third business in the Aakhuamu economic development model, with Hemisphere Productions, owned by Dr. Iya Ajwa Educational Organization, and she informed us, of course, and she thanked the community for supporting. That was last week. As a matter of fact, that was our third week. People supported, purchased products from her business, inquired about her business, made donations, and so forth. Now we are in week number 4. The fourth business of the week is Tiwan Tiwa FDB Mine Village, owned by Naila Sankofa. Iya Naila Sankofa. She's an artist. She deals with textiles, clothing, and so forth, not only sewing and manufacturing and so forth, but also has a number of different things she's doing, working with the community with regard to textiles, teaching, and so forth, production. But then the Tiwan Tiwa FDB Mine Village is an African-centered, independent village that they are planning and structuring in the Austin, Texas area. But they will be building miniature homes, and when you see some of the miniature homes on the website, these small, efficient homes, some of them can be built for $20,000, entire home. These mini homes, they have everything you need within the homes. They're acquiring some land, going to put these homes on this land and have an independent African-centered village in that region for our people to participate in, support, and have business and commerce and so forth, an independent community. So when you look at the website, and I'll put the website in the chat room right now, tiwantiwa.webs.com, and you can go to that for this entire week. Started on Akwesi Sunday all the way through Saturday. This is week number 4, our home economic development, our operation. We're asking everyone to support the business of the week, which is Tiwantiwa FDB Mine Village. So starve the beast, starve that white beast, reallocate those funds, make donations, purchase products, access services from Tiwantiwa, donation button on the page as well. So, and you'll also see her Sankofa Sako website, cultural pieces that she's dealing with, various aspects of culture, education, ritual practices, dealing with the Akan, Yoruba tradition, and so forth, a number of different things that Naila is dealing with and has been doing for years, great work in the community. So please support that business. The list of all of the businesses, so far we have 14 listed, and we're going to be adding more, are on the Aakhuamu page. So when you go to the Aakhuamu page on our website, you'll be able to see all the different businesses. There are direct links to their website, so you can go directly to their website, and also links to their interviews that we did on Blog Talk Radio, the 2-hour interviews we did with each individual, where they sat down with us 2 hours and talked about their businesses, organizations, institutions, how they're serving the community, how their ancestral values shape the manner in which they operate. So please support that, and please share the information. Share the Aakhuamu economic development model. They're also on the page. Not only can you download the model, learn about that, there are 4 videos, Aakhuamu part 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are videos of our 4-part series that we did on the Egua show. You can listen to those 4 shows, and we're talking about different aspects of economic development, including indigenization and economic development rooted in our people, nationhood and economic development, starving the beast, feeding the pride, and so forth, the nature of the model. So we go into detail about that and the philosophy behind it and how we can harness our resources and make a tangible difference. Not just people saying, hey, we need to support black business. We have a number of businesses. People have been able to sit down. You'll be able to sit down and listen to in detail what the businesses are about, 2-hour interviews, and then you can go directly to the website and tangibly support, take money directly from the White Narrow Spring and funnel it directly to our people. By the end of 52 weeks, we'll have supported tangibly 52 different Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions. So, again, Yerase, for those who have been participating, please support and send that information out. Spread it to all your contacts. So the more people, of course, the more support black businesses receive. And if we can add even more than 52 businesses, we need to keep this going. This is constant. It's not like a one-day thing like over the so-called Christmas, shopping season, which if we are intelligent, there's no such thing as a Christmas shopping season because we don't participate in these foolish pseudo-holidays and we don't participate in those pseudo-rituals. So we wouldn't be spending our money at all. We wouldn't be boycotting that for one, year. We boycott it, quote-unquote, for the rest of our lives. So we're talking about something consistent and tangible and real. And so that's on Ecuador Marketplace Day, which is Wednesdays of Ecuador. And then, of course, tonight is ODWIRA, which means purification, ODWIRA Da. Purification, we always say, ODWIRA purification operationalizes Nanasom. Nanasom is our term general term for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Ancestral Religion, which in essence is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. Through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order every moment of every day, consistently. And through ritual, we repel those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to repel, to reject, to hate, in order to maintain and restore balance to ourselves when imbalance has occurred. So these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, Nanasom. And through purification, Jida, we operationalize that ritual process. We operationalize Nanasom. So through purification, we can engage in ritual practices that clean us up and allow us to be open enough to incorporate those things we need to incorporate to harmonize with order and to reject, to recognize, identify, and reject those things, objects, deeds, and individuals and groups that we need to reject, to repel consistently in order to restore balance to our lives and maintain the integrity of divine order within our lives. Jida in the Akan language means purification. To purify, the verb in Ojida means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. Our New Year's celebration for many Akan folk is Ojida, meaning purification. And our New Year celebration, of course, is in September, leading up to the first day of the autumn, the autumn equinox, which is our first day of our New Year, which this past year was September 22nd. So September 22nd was the first day of our New Year, and 6 days before that was the beginning of the celebration. That was the seventh day, which was our New Year's Day. The first day of Atem or Atemet, which is also the first day of our year 13,015. We are in the midst of a 26,000 astronomical year cycle, 26,000 year astronomical cycle. Of course, we don't calculate time based on a fictional cartoon character who never existed, Jesus or Muhammad or any of these fictional cartoon characters. So our celebration is called Ojida. On the continent of Afuraka, you will have many Akan folk who still practice traditional culture, who are not yet brainwashed for the whites, who are not brainwashed for the whites in our spring, and they're not celebrating the New Year in the dead of winter, January 1st, but they still celebrate at a traditional time during the yam harvest and so forth. Around that time in the fall, Jida or Ojida is that celebration. In ancient Kamit, the term Jida means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. So therefore, the term is not an Akan term per se. It's from our ancient ancestral language, the mother language from which the various languages all over Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut come from, which come from ancient Khanat, ancient Nubia, which later some people from Khanat, Nubia migrated north and established Kamit. But the mother language that goes back over 40,000 years, according to our own ancestresses and ancestors, that is the mother language for the various languages you find all across the continent. So that term Jida or Jida is, of course, maintained in the Akan dialects of today, but it's an ancient term meaning the exact same thing. So through purification, we operationalize our ancestral religious practice. Nanasom, or ancestral religion, animates our culture, animates Amammere, animates culture in general. You don't have a culture if you do not have Nanasom, or ancestral religion, no matter what expression it takes, whether it's Akan or Yoruba, Igbo, Ebe, Vodun, whatever it is, it's ancestral religion, ritual incorporation of divine law, the ritual restoration of divine balance. That is what animates our culture. That is what is the foundation of our various cultural expressions, whether it's government, whether it's commerce, whether it's jurisprudence, whether it's cultivation of food, curing diseases, establishing institutions, our military structures, engineering, building shelter, building homes, building schools, building institutions, whatever we engage in, the root of that culture is the ancestral religion. It is through our Nanasom ancestral religion that we are able to attune to the forces in creation that undergird all aspects of creation. The Obosom, the deity, the spirit forces that animate the suns, the moons, the stars, the earth mother, the black substance of space, oceans, rivers, mountains, the atmosphere, thunder, lightning, fire, and so forth, core of the earth, core of the sun, these spiritual forces that animate the physical aspects of creation, that undergird the divine order that is manifest in creation. When we attune to them, then we attune to the order in creation. And once we attune to the order in creation, we can transfer and transmit that order and replicate it when we're building institutions in society, and therefore they replicate the order that is apparent and manifest in creation. Therefore, we have civilization. This is how the ancestral religion animates the culture. Reincarnation, Debra, as it's called in Akan, animates the ancestral religion. We know this is not our only lifetime. We are ancestresses and ancestors in Samanfo who have returned, spirits who have returned, who have lived before, and returned through the wombs of our descendants and are born once again into the world. So therefore, returning into the world, we know that we have a specific function. Before we're sent into the womb, we are sent to Nyamewa, drawn to Nyame, the great mother and great father called Aminet and Amen in ancient Kamit, Nyamewa, Nyame, the same divinities in the Akan tradition, Mawu and Lisa and Vodun and so forth. They give us a function to execute in creation. They assign in our Obosom a divinity to dwell within our head region that we call the Kra and Krawa, Ka and Kaida in ancient Kamek, Kra and Krawa in Akan, Ori, Inu in the Yoruba tradition, Se, Lido and Vodun, and Chi and Igbo and so forth. That divinity that dwells in our head region, that force is always pulling us in harmony with divine order. And we are to align with that force, and spirituality revolves around our alignment and realignment with that force. Coded within that force is our function that we are to execute as a cell within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. So just like you're a cell, you have cells within your body, and as they regulate and execute their functions, they're serving you. We ourselves, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, we are cells within the great divine body of the great mother and great father. We're given a function to execute. We have a purpose. We have a life focus. We're not just out here flailing. We have a real function. Unlike the whites and their offspring, non-black people who are spirits of disorder who have no function. They're the cancerous cells within the body of black humanity who are wayward and criminal and seeking to consume and destroy the black cell. Just like cancerous cells in your body seek to destroy and consume the healthy cells. Of course, we have an immune system to destroy those cells and eradicate them. The whites and their offspring, white Hispanics, white Europeans, white Asians, white Arabs, white Hindus, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Latinos, all non-black people are spirits of disorder. They incarnate in that fashion. That is an immutable reality. They are incarnate without a Kra, and therefore they are spirits without the Kra, without the Ka, without the Kai, without the soul. So they are spirits of disorder, cancerous cells in the body of black humanity. So, of course, we defend ourselves against these cancerous cells through our divine immune capacity, and people who are children of that immune capacity naturally are inclined to eradicate disorder and its purveyor. But we have a function they do not. We have a life focus. We have a purpose. And our ancestral religious practices replenish that purpose and allow us to continue to move forward in a harmonious fashion so that we can execute that purpose and live a harmonious lifestyle and create and live good lives. As we say, to create life that's good, that's harmonious, that's in harmony with our divine function. So that's what ancestral religion is about. It animates the culture. Reincarnation animates the religion. And we know that we are spirits who have returned. We have a specific function, and this is why we are returning. And we seek to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with that divine function we have been given. Just like the cells in your body seek to execute the functions within the organs and organ systems that they are a component part so they can live in harmony with the body. So we are in, this is OHA, which means 100. This is our 100th broadcast. We started May 27th on Blog Talk last year. Previous to that, we had done a number of broadcasts on Ustream TV, internet TV broadcasts. Those videos are on our YouTube site. We are Ojirafo on YouTube. Then in May, May 27th, we started doing Blog Talk Radio. Yedase for everyone who has tuned in and supported and shared the information. We are at, 100 episodes, and thousands, tens of thousands of people have tuned in, have downloaded our broadcast, have shared our broadcast, and gained some great information that has transformed the lives of our people. So, in that vein, what we want to do first, before we get into some of this, some of the other documents, we're going to read something from the Runu Pert Imheru, the book of Coming Forth by Day, often misnomered Book of the Dead, but the Runu Pert Imheru, and it's actually what they will consider chapter 100 of the Runu Pert Imheru. And it's called the Book of Making the Ba, or the Spirit, worthy, and of permitting it to go aboard the boat of Ra with those who are in his suite. So what it says is, I have ferried over the Bennu bird to the east. Alsar is in the region of Per Alsar, the house of Alsar. That's a region in the spirit realm, as well as the ancient Kamit. Alsar is in the Per Alsar. I have thrown open the caverns of Hapi. I have cleared the path to the solar disk, the Aten. I have pulled Seker on his sledge. I have made the great goddess powerful in her moment of action. I have worshipped and provoked the energy of the Aten, the solar disk. I have joined with him who is with the worshiping Adenu, or the sacred animal totems, the baboons who are the sacred animal totems of the ancestresses and ancestors, and I am one of them. I have acted as second to Offset. I have strengthened her powers. I have knotted the rope. I have driven off Apep. I have put a stop to his movements. Ra has given his hands to me, and his crew will not drive me away. If I am strong, the Arid Ra, or the sacred Ucha, or sacred eye of Ra will be strong. If the sacred eye of Ra is strong, then I will be strong. As for him who shall hold me back, or seek to hold me back from the boat of Ra, he shall be held back from the egg and the Abju fish. And then it says, the end of the text says, this is to be said over this written text, which should be written on a clean blank roll with powder of green glaze mixed with water of myrrh, to be placed on the breast of the blessed deceased without letting it touch his flesh. As for any blessed deceased for whom this is done, he will go aboard the bark or the boat of Ra. His spirit will connect with the boat of Ra every day, and Tahuti, the Obosom of divine wisdom, will take count of him in daily going and coming, a matter 1,000,000 times true. So it's talking about someone who has made their transition into the spirit realm, and they want to connect with Ra in the boat of Ra. They have shown that they have lived in harmony with divine order. They're not just announcing that, not just saying some ritual prayers. They have demonstrated through their lives, through their actions, through their functions, that they align with the crowd, the soul, the divine consciousness that's dwelling within their head region, that divinity. Because they were consistent with that, now they are eligible to function as one of the attendants on the boat of Ra, the creator of the universe, and of course Ra is the creatress of the universe. They're infused with that divine power of the sun. When they talk about they provoke the energy of the Aten, the sun, they become one of the Aku. Aku means illuminated. That's a descriptive title. Aku and Akut, male and female titles, descriptive titles, illuminated or shining ones, meaning the ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. So to become illuminated or shining or brilliant. So someone is even physically in the world, if their constitution is harmonious, if they're focused and if they're in alignment with order, their aura is powerful. They have a powerful presence. They have what we call their sunsum is heavy. Sunsum yeduru. Sunsum is heavy. Sunsum has weight. The spirit has power. The spirit is heavy or strong or grounded. And you can feel that powerful presence emanating from them. When such a person makes their transition, if they live in harmony with order, that's because they were able to align their thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order on a consistent basis. with their Kra, and that also means they were able to align their Ba, their divine living energy that animates them, that animates you, the Ba that's circulating through your bloodstream, that life force energy, that force, that's a little portion of the great Ba, the great spirit, Ra and Ra'et, that firepower that's within you. If you live in harmony with divine order, that firepower that comes from Ra and Ra'et, you'll be able to link yours with theirs, you link with them, and now you have access to the energy and the power of the Obosom, and you can function in a harmonious fashion. If you get out of harmony with order, you cut yourself off from that dispensation of energy, and now the only thing you have to operate upon, like we talked about last night, is the residual energy left over, that residual electromagnetic energy left over in your being that's disconnected from the Creator and Creatress, from Ra and Ra'et. And some people will misuse that little residual electromagnetic energy to influence people in negative, things, or reinforce their own lusts and things like that. But when you link the divine energy that's within you with Ra and Ra'et, it's like if you take a deep breath and link the air that's in your lungs with the air surrounding the atmosphere, now there's a direct channel, a link. If you link the divine living energy, that firepower that's within you, link that with the energy of Ra and Ra'et simply by living in harmony with divine order, then their energy is infused within you, and you become an illuminated one, or one that's vibrating at the same frequency of the Obosom, of the divinity. And now you can participate as an honored ancestor and ancestress with the divinities supporting your relatives who are still living on earth. You have the capacity now to show your living descendants who are on earth. You can show them the right way to go. You can direct them as an ancestor and ancestress in a harmonious fashion. You have that capacity, and you've crystallized into that new responsibility. You have increased power and influence, helping to heal people, possess people during ritual and so forth when they pour libation to you, assist women when they're trying to have children, there's a fertility problem, assist other people with diseases, direct children, direct adults on the right path and so forth. You have that capacity as an illumined one, or Aku. So someone who is, this chapter is dealing with that. Someone is trying to show they live in harmony with divine order, so they're asking for access to the boat of Ra. Once they get on that boat of Ra, they become one of the Aku, the shining ones and so forth. They talk about and they describe what they have done. They talked about how they've acted as a second to Offset, the great healeress, strengthened her powers, have knotted the rope, holding the criminals back, repelled the criminals. I've driven off Apet, representing the spirit of referencing the spirit of lust and criminality that manifests in different individuals, sometimes our people, but of course always the whites and their offspring. I've driven them off, put a stop to their movements, and Ra, therefore, has given his hands to me, and his crew will not drive me away. If I am strong, the eye of Ra will be strong. If the eye of Ra is strong, then I will be strong. So as long as we align ourselves with Ra and Ra'et, we have that proper insight, we will be strong, we will be fortified, and we can move forward in a harmonious fashion. And so that is chapter 100, Runu Pert Imheru. This is OHA, the 100th episode, and this is what we have been endeavoring to do with the show, with this purification with OHA, to align ourselves with the Ra and Ra'et, to align our Ba and Ba'et, our energy with theirs, so that we can influence in a harmonious fashion our people back to reality, back to Nanasom, back to Amammere, back to Amansesew. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Culture, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Nationbuilding, Restoration. So this is what we're doing. So let's get into some, and for those who are, if you're on the phone line, if you have a question or a comment, just hit the number 1 so we can see that your hand is raised. And if you're on the, if you're in the chat room, you would have to log in. You can't comment as a guest. You have to log in with the username. You can create one very quickly in Blog Talk if you don't have a username right now. So, okay, so what we're going to do right now, we're going to go to a specific document that we mentioned in the promo for the show, and it kind of builds on what we talked about last week with regard to nationhood. And this particular document is talking about the origin of the name Aakhuamu, but it will show how it relates to the same process, show how it relates to all of our people, especially our people in the Western Hemisphere who've been dislocated from the continent during the Musuokesi, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, and so forth. And we are reclaiming our culture that is inherited, it is inborn, intrinsic, and innate. So it's not something that has to be placed in us, it's something that must be unearthed from within us. So we're going to talk about the origin of the term Aakhuamu in Khanit, Nubia, and Kamit, and show how the same process, you can use the same process for the reclamation of your culture as well, and why it is necessary for us to go back Sankofa ancestrally to reclaim our culture so we can move forward in a harmonious fashion, so we can execute our function in creation, which has been missed by many of our people. Since we have been here, all we have wanted or desired is freedom, independence, sovereignty in the real sense, not the Moorish nonsense, but in the real sense, freedom, independence, self-rule, sovereignty, and the defense of that self-rule. Ever since enslavement, some of our people, during the period of the Musuokesi, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, those who held on to our ancestral religious tradition, Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, as it manifested, for example, the Akan tradition manifested in Suriname and South America as Winti, and is still the Akan tradition in South America. In Jamaica, it manifested as Obia, the Akan tradition in Jamaica. In North America, in the South and Southeastern United States and so forth, it manifested as Hoodoo, which is the Akan tradition in North America, and those who continued our ancestral religious practices, as well as Juju, which is a Yoruba term, and Voodoo, which is a Fon and Hebe term, and the Gullah Geechee culture and so forth. And then, of course, in the Caribbean and South America and so forth, Central America, those who held on to ancestral religious traditions, culture, that means that they continue to align themselves with the order in creation, the forces of nature that undergird creation, were guided, motivated, and empowered to organize themselves, wage war against the whites and their offspring, massacre the whites and their offspring, and free themselves in their lifetime, free their children from enslavement in their lifetime, establish independent, sovereign communities in their lifetime, and defend those communities in their lifetimes and intergenerationally. That's what we were seeking, and that's what we're seeking now. So the people that we venerate, that we should seek to emulate, are the people who actually affected what we seek to affect. We don't emulate individuals who may have had good intentions but were ineffective in their approach. People who are Christians and Muslims and Hebrews and all kinds of everything else. They may have been desirous of being free. Of course, nobody wants to be enslaved, but because they embraced that false tradition, it didn't allow them to have the presence of mind to make proper decisions that will lead to liberation. So we'll look back 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, still talking about the same programs that never liberated any of our people from the control of the whites and their offspring. The only groups of people who liberated our people and actually achieved independence, sovereignty, self-rule, and defended it successfully intergenerationally are those individuals who maintain the ancestral religion and move forward. So those are the people we emulate. Those are the ancestresses and ancestors that we seek to emulate. Those are the ones we venerate. Those are the ones we teach our children about. Akunfo Ya, warrior Ya, also called Nat Turner, leading the war against the whites and their offspring and massacring white men, women, children, staff, and so forth, striking fear in the hearts of the whites and their offspring all over the South, forcing them into the position where they were so fearful that they had to accept abolition. various individuals like that. Okumfo Telemake, Denmark, BC. Okumfo, also Gabriel Prosser and so forth, misnamed Gabriel Prosser, one of our ancestors. We have numerous individuals in North America as well as South America, the Caribbean, Central America, who actually affected what we are trying to achieve. So those are the individuals, those kinds of individuals whose names are not very often mentioned or mentioned in passing. They had the program and they manifested and fulfilled the program. We can talk about other individuals who were, race first people and so forth as a point of trucery. But the ones who actually did the work and were successful, those are who we venerate. That is our motto. They set the precedent. If they could free themselves during enslavement and maintain that freedom intergenerationally, if we follow their model, we can free ourselves from this criminal, economic, political, and social, and in many cases, physical control that the whites and our offspring are still exercising over many of our people right here in North America, as well as Central America, South America, the Caribbean, and so forth. If they could do that, and they set that precedent during their lifetimes, and they didn't have to wait 100 years, we can do the same thing now if we go back to that. What our people have been doing, they've been following the model of either the quote-unquote integrationists or the quote-unquote separatists. So they'll say there were two streams of thought in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit life in America. They'll say the integrationists, represented by Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King and the NAACP and, people like that. And some people followed that mode. Of course, that's not going to do anything but lead you to worship the whites and their offspring and submit to the whites and their offspring. But then you have some nationalists who say, well, we're following the separatists, represented by Martin Delaney, represented by Marcus Garvey, represented by Malcolm X to a certain extent, represented by, nationalists, black nationalists, Pan-African nationalists. So they'll say these are the two streams of thought that were in the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community, and those are the two streams from which we can choose our direction. And what we are saying is those are two sides of the same coin, and that coin is the reality that neither side liberated our people. Now, there's a totally different coin that we need to focus on. Those individuals who embraced ancestral religion and actually freed themselves during slavery and were successful. Why wouldn't we use them as a precedent to move forward? Because the whites and their offspring don't mind us going back and forth and having arguments between the quote-unquote the secular nationalists and the integrationists. As long as we're going back and forth between those two positions, we're still going to be stagnant. What about the people who actually freed themselves? Why don't we focus on them? This is what we are doing. And this is part of our ancestry. The only time that we get back in harmony with order, obviously enslavement and Jim Crow and everything else is disorder. How do you restore order to your life? You embrace your philosophy. It's not a secular philosophy. You can't separate Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion from culture. The whites and offspring will try to make us believe that you can separate ancestral religion from politics, and we need to reject religion, just focus on what pulls us together as black people. That's pure nonsense. That's European pseudo-psychology. And some of our people embrace that because they didn't know any better. But we know better. We know better now just based on experience, but we also know better because when we attune to our own ancestors and ancestors, they can show us through reality what actually took place. That is pseudo-psychology, is propaganda. As long as they cut us off from the forces that undergird order, we will never align ourselves consciously with order. So therefore, we will never restore order to our lives. And remember, ancestral religion is about the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. Once we engage in ritual processes, we attune to what is orderly, what is acceptable, what is to be accepted or in law, loved, quote unquote, and who and what to hate, to reject, to repel, to exterminate, to eradicate. You learn that from the forces that govern divine law and divine hate, the two poles of the created order. If you don't do that, you're still enslaved by the whites and their offspring, no matter how passionate you are. You can be a passionate secular nationalist, but you're still out of order. Clearly, we have not moved forward. We're no closer to liberation today than we were 100 years ago. It's not like we've been making, incremental steps toward 100% liberation, and now we're closer than we've ever been. Our people's mindsets are so far from being independent, sovereign, self-ruling, self-governing, and self-defending than they've ever been. We were closer to that 100 years ago than we are right now, but we have not been making progress. Only those individuals who have been focused and seeking to reclaim our actual culture, progress is being made. But if you're still just floating between secular nationalism and integrationism, all you're doing is propagating the model of the whites and their offspring. And it's propaganda. So we're breaking through that nonsense. So what we're going to do is talk about establishing identity. And when we read through this piece, this is just an example of how, we did this, but then all of our people can engage the same process. So the name of this particular document is Aakhuamu, origin of the name Aakhuamu in Khanit, Nubia, and Kamit. So, of course, Aakhuamu is a subgroup of the Akan people, and we are the Aakhuamu nation in North America. This is an ethnic designation. So when we wrote this piece, we learned from our Nsamafo, got direction from our Nsamafo that the term Aakhuamu actually comes from the language of ancient Kamit, and they directed us to that kind of information. So, of course, we went to go research to find it, investigate it. We found the information and published the document and showed them Medutu as well. So we say Akanfo, Akan people in the tree language of Akanfo in the tree language of the Akan means Akan people. Akanfo originated in Khanit, Nubia, also called, Knesset, at the beginning of human existence upon Asase, Earth. This is the region of contemporary Sudan and South Sudan in the eastern region, Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, Africa. And of course, we have our book, Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the term Africa, and we are the first to prove that that term actually comes from our ancient language, and we show in the Medutu conclusively that the term Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut exists, dealing specifically with the first landmass to rise up out of the primordial waters at the creation of the universe. So we prove that in our book, and you can download that book for free, of course, from our publications page. So Khanit, Nubia, is the region of contemporary Sudan and South Sudan in the eastern part of Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut. We eventually migrated around the world. Some Akanfo migrated north of Khanit and settled ancient Kamit, ancient Egypt, while others remained in Khanit, Nubia. Over the millennia, Akanfo migrated to West Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, West Africa, establishing the ancient civilization of Akana, which is Ghana, once again, the ancient empire of Ghana. Some Akanfo were also a component of the Kanem Empire, the pre-Bornu Kanem Empire, later called Kanem Bornu. But pre-Bornu, the Kanem Empire, some of our people were part of that. The original, authentic, black Berber Empire, the original Berbers, of course, and we have images of them in the book, the Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut. The original Berbers, of course, have been in North Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut for over 10,000 years. Whites and offspring would later invade and pollute the blood circle over the past couple of thousand years. So, of course, now when you Google Berbers, many images you'll see of the whites and their offspring, just like if you Google Egyptians, you'll see a bunch of white Arabs, but of course the original people were the black people. The original authentic black Berber Empire, this is why Akan people call themselves Etibri Fo. Bri means black or dark. Bi means a person, someone. Obibri Fo means the group of people, folk who are black. And one of the major terms for Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut in the Akan language is Etibri Mai, which is the nation or mind of Etibri, the black people. So we call our nation Epibimai or Epibrimai, the black nation. We call ourselves Epibifo, black people. And for an individual, it's Obibini, meaning a black person. So all the fools talking about we didn't call ourselves black and we didn't call our nations black. We literally call ourselves black. Every single Akan individual calls themselves black and calls Afuraitkait itself the black nation. So, the Epibri, coming from Bri, or Ber, the original black Berber empire. And you can find the term Berber, BR in ancient Kamit as well. Also a part of the Kong Empire before ultimately migrating to and settling in the areas of contemporary Ghana and Ivory Coast. The Kong Empire of North, like where northern Ivory Coast is, around northern Ivory Coast, northeastern Ivory Coast, northwestern Ghana, today's borders, around Burkina Faso, in that region where the Kong Empire was, we were part of that as well. Before ultimately migrating further south to the regions of contemporary Ivory Coast and Ghana today. Akan people presently comprise approximately 45% of the population of Ghana, about 11 million people, 42% of the population of Ivory Coast, about 9 million people. So there are collectively about 20 million Akan in West Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, including further smaller populations in Togo, Burkina Faso, and other areas. During the Musuo Ketie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, the Akan ethnic group as today comprise one of the largest ethnic groups in West Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut. Many Akan were thus captured as prisoners of war, shipped to the Americas and the Caribbean and Europe, and forced into enslavement over the course of 3 centuries. As a result, Akan represent one of the largest groups of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans living in the Western Hemisphere today. There are millions of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut of direct Akan descent, genetically and spiritually, extant within the populations of the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe, who refer to themselves variously as African Americans, African Canadians, Afro-Brazilians, Jamaicans, Afro-Cubans, Afro-Caribbeans, Africans in Britain, Spain, Portugal, France, and so forth. And of course, this is true of Yoruba people and Igbo people and Ibibio people and Efik people and Fang people and Bassa people and Mindi-speaking people, Bakongo people, and so forth. The same process is taking place. And there are many of those groups, of course, all over the Western Hemisphere. Now, we show the terms Aakhuamu spelled in the Medutu. And we show 2 different terms, Aakhuamu Ur and Ukumu Seku. So we show this in the article. The tree language of the Akan is directly derived of our ancestral language of Khanit and Kamit. In the language of ancient Khanit and Kamit, the Aakhuamu Ur are the stars that never rest. They continue their movements across the sky on a nightly basis. Conversely, the Aakhuamu Seku are the stars that never set. These are the circumpolar stars that appear in the same location nightly. The stars are also called Aku, the Shining One, which is also a title, as we said earlier, of our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors in Kamit. The Aku, Akutu, the Shining, Illuminated, Wise One. This is the basis of the title Aku, the Shining Ones, Aakhuamu Seku, and we show that in the Medutu. Now, the Aku or Akutu in ancient Kamit, the illuminated shining ones, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, those spirits that even when they manifest, an ancestral spirit manifests, and one can see them in the house, their aura is vibrant, is powerful, is strong, is bright, as opposed to a dim, weak aura and so forth. They're commonly called in Akan culture, Nanasom Nsamanfo, spiritually cultivated Nsamanfo. Aakhuamu is also spelled Kumu in ancient Kamit. So we already showed Aakhuamu Ur and Aakhuamu Seku in ancient Kamit, the stars that never rest, the ones that keep moving across the sky. So you look up in the sky at night, certain constellations are in one position. You look up the next night, they're a little bit further west. You look up the next night, they're a little bit further west, and they keep moving. Then you have the Aakhuamu Seku, The circumpolar stars, you look up at night, they're in one position. The next night, they're in the same position. The next night, they're in the same position, and so forth. The stars that never rest and the stars that never set. So they're Aakhuamu-Ord, Aakhuamu-Seku, also called Kumu-Ord and Kumu-Seku without the A prefix. Now, here's the key. In the Obosom, or the true story of the Aakhuamu people, a subgroup of the Akan of West Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, it is said that the origin of the name Aakhuamu is Kom-Bu, meaning neck, comb, and break, bu. The N sound is nasal, like the N in the English word senora. So K-O-N is Kong with a nasal N. It is said that when the army and a section of the royal family of this group of Akan folk were migrating away from their homeland in Trifo, Hemai, to reestablish their nation in a new location. These are the people who will later be called Aakhuamu in general. They were living in the region of Trifo, Hemai. There were different disputes politically, and they decided to move away from there, migrate away from Trifo, Hemai, to reestablish their nation in a new location. They passed through the Fanti area. The Fanti are another Akan subgroup. The largest Akan group is the Asante people. You often hear about them called the Ashanti. That's the largest Akan group. Then the second largest Akan group is the Fanti. And then under them, then you have like Aakhuamu and Dinchara, a number of different groups. So we were in the Trifo Hemai area. We wanted to reestablish our nation in a new location. As we migrated away, we passed through the Fanti area. Because of the large numbers of us passing through the area, the Fanti are said to have stated, Nipa na wodoso se woshwe wan a na wo kon abu, meaning these people are so numerous, even looking at them breaks one's neck. The people were thus called Akombu-fo. Kom meaning neck, abu, or bu meaning to break, Akombu, Akombu-fo, Akomu-fo, and later Aakhuamu-fo, Aakhuamu-fo, and so forth. So Kwa, K-W-A, is also spelled K-O-A, Akwa, and it's just like in ancient Kamit. There's no letter O in ancient Kamit. The U-A is the symbol of a rope that's bent over with like a lasso with a loop. It's the Wa sound. That's the sound that's transliterated as the O sound. But it's a W-A or U-A, Wa. Same in the Akan tradition. Kwa, Akwa, A-K-O-A is also A-K-W-A. This is why, for example, you'll have the name Kwa Bena, a male born on Bena Dara Tuesday, a child of the Obosom Bena. Kwa Bena, K-W-A, will also be spelled Ko Bena, K-O-B-E-N-A. Ko Bena or Kwa Bena, because they're interchangeable. So Akombu-fo becomes Akombu-fo and Aakhuamu-fo, and this is where the name comes from according to the Obosom, the true story of the people. The ancient origin of this story, however, references our ancient ancestresses and ancestors from Khanit and Kamit, the Aku and Akutu being identified, the ancient ancestresses and ancestors being identified with the Aakhuamu, or the stars that never rest, that group of stars that paraded across the sky without cease at a neck-breaking cadence. The Aakhuamu-Or became the Aakhuamu-Or, Aakhuamu-Or, Aakhuamu, 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 and Aakhuamu. So the exact same story when you look in the cosmology of ancient Kamit, the stars that keep moving across the sky. Aakhuamu-Or. In the Akan rendition of that story today, they say, listen, these people were moving, they were migrating across, they came through our area, and there was so many of them. It was like breaking your neck, trying to keep up with all the people who kept going by you. It's like the stars parading across the sky, the stars that never rest. So, our connection to the stars is Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, is a spiritual connection rooted in the relationship we have with the Obosom, the deities, who animate and govern the celestial bodies. absolutely nothing to do with the idiocy of extraterrestrialism. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut do not come from other star systems, galaxies, planets, etc. We come from Afua, our Earth Mother. So we have to put that in there because, of course, many of our people follow the whites and their offspring, and they would seek to, associate some nonsensical extraterrestrial foolishness with our culture. And that's propaganda promoted by the whites and their offspring. Note that in the Akan language, as we said, the kwa combination is often interchangeable with the ko, and then we gave the example of kwa bina and ko bina and kwafi and kofi and kwajo and kojo, same as kwamu and komu and akon, interchanging the kwa with the ko. And we also talk about how there's no letter O. So we find in Kamit variations of the term kom and komu, as well as kom and kamu, which mean neck and throat, in the medu, in the hieroglyphs. So just like kom means neck in the Akan language, kom means neck and throat in the medusa. So we show two of those spellings of the term neck and throat, kom, in the hieroglyphs of ancient Kamit. Kom as well as komu. Moreover, the term Ord, as in komu Ord, the stars that never rest, Ord, W-R-D or U-R-D, in ancient Kamit means to tire, to be weary, to grow weary, to die. So Ord, W-R-D or U-R-D, to tire, to be weary. So the Aakhuamu or are the stars that never become tired or never become weary or never rest. So then we show those two terms together, kom, meaning neck in ancient Kamit, throat, Ord, meaning immobility or cessation, and komu, Ord, talking about the stars that never rest, never become immobile, never cease. But komu also means neck or throat. So the neck, komu, is wearying, Ord. The neck, komu, is tiring, Ord, stars. The constant movement of the stars that never rest cause your neck, komu, to grow weary, grow tired, break, or die, Ord. The etymology given for the name, Aakhuamu today, Aakhuamu meaning neck breaking, reveals the cosmology encoded in our ancient language and informs our identity as Aakhuamu. So we show that, and the key here is when you look at these, when you look at the cosmology, for example, in different groups, in the Akan tradition, they'll have an oral tradition, just like this one. It says, hey, these people came from one area, they were moving through our area, and so many of them, we kept trying to look at our neck, it was a neck-breaking pace, kombu. And then you look at ancient Kamit, and the stars that never rest, they keep moving so fast, keep going, that they keep, cause your neck to, quote-unquote, break, neck-breaking, komu. So it's the same oral tradition that seems like it's just a local, recent oral tradition that's only been around for a few hundred years to give a folk etymology for the origin of a specific name. You look deeper into the culture, you'll find that quote-unquote folk etymology or that local oral tradition goes back tens of thousands of years. You find the same thing across the board. So we need to respect our culture. When we respect our culture, respect our ancestresses and ancestors and their wisdom, their knowledge that they transfer directly to us, and we're talking about our ancestresses and ancestors who are connected to us by blood, that still communicate with us and help usher us into the womb when we were an ancestral spirit in the ancestral realm as a colleague of theirs, and they ushered us into the womb to be born once again through Bebra reincarnation into the world once again. When we listen to them and respect our culture, then we can find detailed, pinpointed accuracy in the culture, in the language, in the ritual practices. If we operate like the whites and their offspring and become pseudo-linguists and pseudo-culturalists and pseudo-anthropologists and pseudo-historians and pseudo-archaeologists, what we end up doing is listening to the oral traditions and say, oh, well, that's just those people's primitive traditions. They really don't know what they're talking about. What they really mean is this, and then we come up with some ridiculous notion about what the people really meant, because we have no respect for them, because we think they're inferior, because we've learned that from the whites and their offspring. But when we respect the traditions, then we actually find that deep within the tradition is actually cosmology that spans thousands of years. If you look at, for example, in the Yoruba tradition, and they talk about Orisha Oko used to be a hunter, and a few hundred years ago, and then eventually he became sedentary, and Orisha Oko is shown, his staff is shown, he became an agriculturalist, became sedentary. He's an Orisha of fertility and so forth. When he's paired with Oshun, and she's called Oshun Ibu Dioko, or Oshun, the wife of Oko, her symbolism is the vulva, and his symbolism as Orisha Oko, dealing on one hand with the farm and fertility, but Orisha Loko, meaning he of the phallus, the Ko, meaning the phallus. His symbol is the phallus, her symbol is the vulva, and the union of the phallus and the vulva is the fertility aspect. Of course, Oshun deals with fertility, reproduction, deals with the that sensory, that energy that deals with the sensory desire that's the precursor to sexual activity, that magnetism and so forth, and the replenishment of the harmony of that desire. So you have that natural force, magnetism, that draws the male and female together so that conception can take place, and the replenishment of the harmony of that force so that that can continue. So Oshun governs that. Of course, she's Afi in the Akan tradition, Oshun in the Yoruba tradition, Azili in Vodun, Het Heru in ancient Kamit, but then her name Afi in Akan, she's also called Cheche in Akan, which comes from Het Her in ancient Kamit, same divinity. When they talk about him dealing with that, Orisha Oko, he of the Oko of the phallus, Ko means phallus. In ancient Kamit, Ka or Ka means phallus. And Akan, Kote means phallus. So you'll see that the divinity Min, or Min Amen, in ancient Kamit, he's the great divinity, and he's always ithyphallic. He has an erect phallus. He's dealing with fertility, regeneration, inseminating creation constantly. So he's mummified and he has an erect phallus. And then he's paired with Het Heru. So they'll talk about men and Het Heru, or men and Hathor. And she is represented by the vulva in ancient Kamit. So he's represented by the phallus. She's represented by the vulva. Men and Het Heru is Orisha Oko and Oshun. When they say he used to be a hunter, and there was a man who was a hunter a few hundred years ago, and then at some point he settled down and he became an agriculturalist, and he became sedentary. When you're talking about Orisha Oko constantly inseminating creation, when the sperm cell leaves, it is a hunter, and it hunts and seeks out the egg, but once it reaches the ovum and penetrates and they unite and fuse, then it's no longer hunting anymore. He becomes sedentary, and then fertility and development and mitosis and everything else can happen, and the unfolding of life can take place. This is a cosmological foundation for these oral truth stories. That story goes back thousands of years to the ancient Khanit. It's not just talking about a few hundred years ago in a certain region in the Oyo Empire that there was a man named Oko who was a hunter and later became an agriculturalist. It's talking about the function of that divinity. The whites and their offspring will read a story like that and say, well, there was a man named Oko. He was, honored and revered as an elder. When he died, he became a deified ancestor, and the people venerated him and poured libation to him. And after a number of centuries, they elevated him to an Orisha or divinity or Irumole and so forth. And therefore, all of the deities are really just deified ancestors. That's pure stupidity. And the whites and their offspring are always pushing this notion that the Orisha, the Obosom, the Vodou, and so forth are simply deified ancestresses and ancestors because they do not want to admit that there are actually divinities, forces in nature that we can commune with, that possess us, that communicate with us, that we can align with, that we can learn from, because that proves their inferiority. They already understand their inferiority, but they don't want us to reclaim that knowledge of their inferiority, because then we won't seek to emulate them or try to align with them. We will only seek to eradicate them. So the whites and their offspring have always been trying to take agency away from the Orisha, the Obosom, the divinity. Like they have, number one, no power, or in fact, they don't even exist. And they're always seeking ways to try to put forth this notion that there really are no deities. And then you have brainwashed Negroes who are pseudo-linguists, pseudo-psychologists, pseudo-historians, pseudo-anthropologists, pseudo-spiritualists who get initiated into priesthoods, and they go to the continent and so forth. They connect with infected so-called elders and eldresses who've been infected by the whites and their offspring, with Islam and Christianity for the past couple hundred years. And they will teach them, oh, yes, these are just deified ancestors, and all we're doing is doing little rituals, and it's really no different than chemistry. You mix certain herbs and so forth, you'll get a desired result, and this is just science, and that is the sacred mystery, that in reality there are no deities, and that's all fiction, and the sacred mystery is we're just chemists. Pure idiocy, because these people have been disconnected from the forces of nature. They don't want to admit that they no longer have that connection, because they're following their lust and some of them their malice. So they're cut off from the Orisha, cut off from the Obosom, and the only spirits they can work with are weak, degenerate, deceased spirits, or just working with little mineral life and plant life and creating little chemical compounds and whispering incantations that are totally ineffective to make it appear to be ritual and deep and so forth and a mystery. That's all they can do because they're cut off. But that has no bearing on the normal people who have the Obosom, the Orisha, the Vodou connected with them. So you have pseudo-intellectuals who go get initiated by these individuals on the continent. They get this misinformation, and they come back thinking they have a credential, and now they can speak on the tradition because they've been initiated by some brainwashed Negro on the continent who's been misinforming them. And then they write books and do presentations and give speeches and do videos and everything else, totally misinforming the people. So you defang these Negroes by embracing your own culture and learning your own culture. Just like we can show with Orisha Oko and Oshun, just like we show with here with the origin of the term Aakhuamu, these oral true stories are rooted in our cosmology, and the cosmology is undergirded by the Obosom who actually birthed the cosmology. We don't make up little stories about the dead. Obosom possesses someone and communicates, then we pass that information on. We talk about how they possess and how they move and how they operate in creation. When we talk about their sacred colors, it's not just because, hey, the sky is blue, so we're going to say a deity, sacred color is blue. When that force in nature moves through space, moves through the great Khan-Kaed, moves through the atmosphere and so forth, and they generate a specific color, that is the color that naturally connects to them because that's the color or collection of colors they generate. That's their sacred color. Just like when sunlight shines through, rain or mist and it's refracted, and then the burst of colors comes out of a rainbow, because of the movement of energy, certain colors manifest. And we can determine the actual color, sacred colors of the Obosom based on their functioning in creation. And the same is true of their names. The same is true because as they move through creation, they generate a specific configuration of sounds, and those sounds that are unique to them and their energy. And we did a whole broadcast on that, and the sounds of the Obosom and the nature of their birth names, as well as the broadcast on Oboade Pata. We talked about that in detail, as well as the broadcast on Renin and Reninit, the nature and function of the name. Based on their movements, they generate that configuration of sound vibrations, and therefore we can replicate those vibrations and enunciate their name. So their names, their sacred colors, their functions in creation, our knowledge of that is based on our interaction with them, our engagement with them. If you're not engaging the Obosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, which you have the responsibility to do and the capacity to do, then you're not engaged in spirituality. The whites and their offspring always seek to remove agency from the divinities, and then later say they never existed, period. And brainwashed Negroes follow along with that. Of course, you have Negroes who are agents of the whites and their offspring who work on their behalf. The vast majority of our people who are misinforming our people, they're misinforming out of ignorance because they're still enamored with the white narrow spring, so they will push nonsense like atheism and evolution and everything else and reject the culture of our ancestors and ancestors because they have no connection to it. So anytime you look at a real oral tradition, you can extract the ancient cosmology which is rooted in the functioning of the Obosom in creation. So this is what we have done here, and this can be done with all of our culture, all of our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit cultures. Whatever culture you're a part of, you can do the same thing. Okay, so further we go into, hold on one second, just want to make sure we saw, somebody was saying they were having an issue. Okay, they were having an issue hearing, but you're saying it's back up. And sometimes you may have to reboot, or not reboot, but sometimes you might have to log out of Blog Talk and log back in. A couple of weeks ago, Blog Talk was having an issue for a number of days with all of the shows, just the entire network, with regard to some sound and with regard to people calling in and so forth. They said they rectified that. So if you're having an issue, just log out and then log back in and see if that works out. Or refresh the page. Okay. All right. So the next section, next part of the section, Aakhuamu also means inert, without, not. Aakhuamu also means to smite, to seize violently. Aakhuamu also means to destroy, to beat to death. Aakhuamu also means to extinguish a fire or flame. Aakhuamu means those who extinguish. That's in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs in the language of ancient Kamit. Then we show the Akan term. Kum means to kill, to bring it into. Kum means to destroy, to overthrow, to bring to naught. And Okumfo, K-U-M, not Okomfo, which is a priest or priestess, certain kind of priest or priestess, but Okumfo is thus one who kills. This becomes an honorific title in Akan culture. Okum Nipa means killer of persons. Okum meaning to kill, Nipa the plural for person. This is an honorific title of kings who are honored for their military prowess. It is also a title of the Creator, he who holds life and death in his grip. So Okum Nipa is a praise name in Mrane for the Creator of the universe. The killer of persons, the ones who engage in disorder, he destroys their lives and removes them from the planet. Again, when you look at that title, Okum Nipa, killer of persons, has an honorific title, not just for kings who, wage war and are victorious, but a title of the Creator, Ra Nyokumpon and Ra'et Nyokumpon and so forth, Creatress. That's not just, again, an oral tradition, just a recent folk etymology and a recent oral tradition. If you look at the ancient text, the Book of the Cow of Heaven, also called the Destruction of Mankind, there's an entire narrative talking about Ra destroying or killing through the Obosom segment, sending her out to kill those males and females, those men and women who are engaged in disorder. And first Ra called his elders and elderesses, Nu and Nut, and the various elder and elderess divinities that were with him in the beginning. He tells them he wants to destroy these criminal men and women, but he won't move forward until he gets their direction. So the Creator of the universe seeks counsel from his ancestresses and ancestors before he moves. And of course, Amen and Amenet are the great God and the great goddess. Ra and Ra'et are grandchildren of Amen and Amenet, the Supreme Being. Creator and Creatress are the grandchildren of the Supreme Being, and the Supreme Being sends the Creator and Creatress out to create the universe, just like you as a being direct your life force energy through your reproductive organs to go out and create a child through the sperm and ovum cell. But you're the great being, and you direct that energy to do that, just like Amen and Amenet are the great being, and they direct Ra and Ra'et, Nyokumpon and Nyokunton, or Dad, Ida Huedo, Otumare, Oshumare, to go out and create. So that's key. But the creator of the universe gets direction from his elders and elders first, and then they sanction his activity, and he sends out Seshima Sekhmet to go and kill the disordered men and women. And then after she slaughters and massacres a large percentage of them, the most of them, the few that were left over, the other men and women who were good and lived in harmony with order, they came forward with their shields and their weapons, and Ra directed them to go finish off the rest of the disordered men and women. So when we talk about Okum Nipa, the killer of persons, as an honorific title, it's honorable to kill the enemy, the purveyors of disorder. Not only for kings and queen mothers, but the creator of the universe does that. That goes right back to an ancient cosmology. Now, so we say the Aakhuamu became the most powerful Akan empire of their time and were known for their military prowess and the size and expanse of their empire. So many of their vassal states, their war machine was seen as unstoppable. In ancient Khanit and Kamit and Akan culture, certain warrior kings were recognized for their military prowess and their ability to kill their enemies or swallow them up like a crocodile. So we have in Kamit, Kum, to overthrow, destroy, attack. In Akan, Kum, to overthrow, to destroy, to kill. In ancient Kamit, the word Kum, meaning to bring an end to cease, to bring to naught. In the Akan language, Kum, to bring an end to cease, to bring to naught. So we're still showing these same terms in both languages. Of course, Akan is the derivative of the ancient language. So we say here we have the connection between the Aakhuamu as a great military power with an unstoppable stars that never rest again war machine, because the stars that never rest, they keep moving, but then their military force was unstoppable as well, like the stars that never rest. So the Aakhuamu, a great military power with an unstoppable stars that never rest war machine, led by an Okumfo, a killer, swallows up his enemies. To swallow up as a form of killing. Kum, like the Odenchum, the crocodile in Akan, is directly related to Kum or Kam in ancient Kemet, meaning neck or throat. Kum or Kumu, to bring to naught in ancient Kemet. Kum, to kill, overthrow, destroy, beat to death in ancient Kemet. Aakhuamu, those who extinguish in ancient Kemet. Aakuma, meaning to smite or seize violently in ancient Kemet. This is the swallowing up of the victim by the Odenchum. The crocodile is the death of the victim. When the victim enters the neck or the throat, Kumu, the victim expires, or when the Odenchum of the crocodile bites or breaks, Bu, the neck, Kom, the victim dies. So we just show Kom and Ur, the neck and death in the ancient language of Kemet, Komur or Komu, Kwamu, and then Kom and Bu, neck breaking in the Akan language, still talking about that death and so forth. So again, we're showing the connection between the ancient language and the derivative. And then finally, Akum also means a riverbank, and Akumut, bank of a river, in the Medusa. So we show the Medusa for that. So we say we also see above that Akumut in Kemet is the bank of a river. Over 450 years ago, prior to our migration into the region of contemporary Ghana, the Aakhuamu were part of the Kumbu or Kumu Kingdom in the Kong area, contemporary Ivory Coast region. At times, we lived along the sacred river now called Pomo, also written with a K or a C, and so forth. Kumbu and Kumo as a name of the kingdom and the river is etymologically related in the name Aakhuamu as manifest in contemporary Twi as Kumu, Akum, Akumut from ancient Khanit and Kemet. So we show the river Como in Ivory Coast. You'll see some who talk about the origin of the Aakhuamu people. They'll say the Aakhuamu were the Kombu people from the Kombu kingdom living along the Kombu River. And then they migrated from that region in what is northern Ivory Coast and moved further down south into southern Ivory Coast and into southern Ghana and so forth, and they continued as Aakhumu or Aakhuamu people. We're showing again that that narrative, that oral tradition, that the people lived along the river. The river was called Kumu, and we show in the Mitutu the name river bank or bank of a river is Aakhuamu, and then the people are called that. So again, when you respect the tradition and you ask the Nsamanfo to show you who are you, where do you come from, and part of the tradition has a narrative. That narrative is not just some recent folk etymology, unless people have been corrupted by the whites and their offspring. When it's really part of the traditional culture, when you take it all the way back, it has a cosmological foundation. You will find these foundations in the language of ancient Kamit. Whether it's Igbo, Efe, Vodun, Fula, whatever it is, you'll find it in ancient Khanit, ancient Nubia, and so forth, which of course is the mother of Kamit. Khan or Khanat means first or foremost, the south, in the front, in the beginning. And the land is called Khanat or the Khanit land. Before Kamit in the north was called Kamit or Tamere, the land that's buried or submerged, or Kamit, the black country before people migrated and settled there, before the river deposited the black silt along the banks of the river and filled in the landmass so that people can settle up in these regions. Even before it was called Kamit, it was called Kan and Kanu, meaning the interior land. Just like Nubia is called Kanu because they named the same place, just like we migrate from one place, move to the next place, and we give it the same place name that we had previously. We were living in Khanat, the Khanit land, and when we migrated north, thousands of years later, we'll end up calling it Kan or Khanit, the land of the interior, the first land, the front land. Then later on, you start dealing with the so-called Middle Empire, so-called Middle Kingdom, and so forth. Then the term Kamit begins to be used, and Amammere begins to be used, and so forth. So we're talking about Khanat, Nubia, from the beginning, from the south, the origin, first land, front land, first from the beginning, and all of that. And this is the source. Now, that's key because we talk about Kamit, we talk about the various, writings and all the different documentation that's found in Kamit is very extensive. Of course, there's documentation in Khanat, or Nubia as well, which is the parent of Kamit. And this is where all of our people have come from. Some migrated north, some migrated further south, some migrated west, some migrated southwest, some migrated southeast, some migrated east, and so forth. But the parent culture is coming from the south. So that's the nexus of the language, nexus of the ritual practices, and so forth. We get possessed in these regions first by the Obosom, and then we carry that culture with us. After we have been possessed, we carry that culture that we have received through possession wherever we migrate into the world, all over the continent and later into different parts of the world. So let's look at some information dealing with ancient Khanat, ancient Nubia, and we'll be getting more into that as the weeks come in. Okay, hold on 1 second. All right, I thought I saw it. Okay, so you all were talking about that system-wide issue in the chat room. All right, so when you look at very often they talk about Kush, Napata, and Barua or Berua, later called Merua or Mero, and so forth. It's not just talking about the 25th dynasty of Kamit and the quote-unquote Kushite dynasty and, Pianki and Shabaka and Shabataka and Taharka and the various, and Aman and Amani and so forth, the various kings coming in and ruling in the 25th dynasty and so forth. It's more to ancient Khanat than that. Even the interaction with ancient Kamit, it goes back prior to that. So when you look at Tahuti, Mesh III, and so forth, when they go deep into Khanat, into so-called Nubia 3,500 years ago, that's when they came across what the mountain that's now called Jebel Barkal, or Jebel Barkal, which is the Great Mountain. It's a huge mountain with a flat top. and it's deep within, around the fourth cataract and so forth of Khanit, or Nubia, deep down in the south. And when they came and saw that huge mountain rising up out of the region with the flat top, they recognized that as the seat of Amen and Amammere. And they developed a region there, they developed temples and a society there, and they began to have their coronations on that great mountain deep within Khanit. This is going back 3,500 years ago. The kings of Kamit saw that as the original sanctuary of Amen and Amammere, and they showed depictions. When they drew that mountain, they would show the mountain, and they would show the cutout of the mountain on the inside, and they showed Amen sitting inside of that mountain. At the mountain, one of the titles of the mountain was called Ju-Wab, meaning the pure mountain. Of course, it is an elevated land. The title for a raised land is Ka and Kaet. So you will see Amen, the great hidden divinity, sitting inside of the mountain. So it's Amen or Amen-Ra, sitting inside of the Ka. Amen-Ra-Ka, the Ka of Amen, or Amen-Ra. He's sitting inside of it. This is the great mountain. They called it the Southern Apet Asut, just like you have so-called Karnak, Apet Asut, or the thrones, the sanctuary of the thrones, Apet Asut. They called this the Southern Apet Asut. And sometimes they call it the Southern Apet Resi, because it was they saw this as the original sanctuary of Amen and Amammere, and then Karnak or Apet Asut and Apet Resi Luxor, they considered that the northern portion and the later sanctuary, but they saw ancient Kanat as the sanctuary. You'll also find, so Napata as a region, as a civilization was established back then. Later on, the kings of Kamit, they pulled away from that area. The people who were still in Khanit, they continued with Napata and so forth, and then some of them eventually became the kings and queen mothers who would go up into the 25th dynasty and take over and reestablish order in Kamit after some of the foreigners had taken over. This was not a foreign Nubian dynasty or foreign Kushite dynasty who came in and invaded Kamit. They were all relatives. They were descendants of the priests and priestesses of Amen and so forth and Amammere. They were just restoring order to their northern civilization. And they went in and took over and reestablished order and so forth. There was a explosion of building and architecture and everything else. Pyramids were being built once again, hadn't been happening in centuries. So there was a renaissance in that sense. They will call that, some of our teachers will call that the last golden age of ancient Kamit and so forth, 25th dynasty. But then eventually they retreated back after the Assyrian invasions. They retreated back into Kanat, into Nubia, and they just continued to maintain their civilization there for another 1,000 years and so forth. While there were different things going on, dynamics, political dynamics going on in Kamit, some nomes and some groups weren't, joining together. So when the Assyrians would come, some were disorganized, they weren't unified, so they were defeated. They were separated, they were defeated. Then the Persians come in, they removed the Assyrians to a certain extent. Some of our people allied with the Persians, some of our people did not. So you have, for example, the Temple of Heb, or what they call it the Temple of Hybis, during the reign of Darius in ancient Kamit. Some of our people were rocking with Darius. And then you'll see in Persia, you'll see him wearing the hem crown and so forth, the triple crown with the horns and so forth. If you saw an image of him wearing these crowns, you would think that this was a relief from ancient Kamit. It's actually a relief from Persia, because they were imitating our culture, just like later when the Persians were forced out by the Greeks began to imitate our culture, our mode of dress, our ritual practices, our temples, and everything else. So some of our people were rocking with the Persians while they were there. Some of our people were not. Our people were, disorganized, separated, divided, and so forth. So the Persians were able to come in. When some of them became more abusive, then the Greeks come in. Some of our people were rocking with the Greeks. Some of our people were not. Just like some of our people today, are brainwashed and they will try to ally with the whites and offspring, and some of our people will not. And there are fissures that happen, separation, fractures that take place. The people who are focused, they will separate from the Negroes who are trying to make all kinds of excuses to ally with the whites and offspring, and then the civilization begins to crumble. But the people who are intelligent, they will move, reestablish themselves, reestablish civilization, and defend that. And some of our people went in further south and, just fortified Napata and moved forward. And then hundreds of years later, they removed the capital from Napata to Merua, and which later is called Mero, and they continued, and that whole civilization from Napata all the way through to Meru to the fall of Meru was another 800 to 1,000 years. So we continued the civilization. That's in the south. Some of our people, instead of going further south, some of our people migrated west and continued as we talked about before, continued the Akan or Khanit, Nubian civilization in the west. That became the Empire of Ghana. Then you have Mindi-speaking people, including the Dogon people. They're continuing the culture where they are. Yoruba people, Igbo people, Ebe people, Fon people, and so forth. Everybody continuing that culture. So the culture of ancient Khanat or Nubia, culture of ancient Kamit, it didn't die. It lives in the west. Just like they say hip-hop didn't die, it lives in the south. For a minute they were saying that. Ancient Kamit didn't die. It moved to the west and the south. And those civilizations, ancient Ghana, manifested and lasting for another 1,000 years. And then when the Muslim invasions come and some of our people rock with these fools and some of our people don't, there's a separation in society. Some people move from there and they move further south. Just like in the eastern part of the continent, some of our people who connected with the Persians and Greeks and so forth, some of our people didn't want to have anything to do with that, so they moved further south and continued their civilization for hundreds of years. Some of our people didn't want to roll with the whites and offspring and the Negroes who were dealing with them, but some of our people did. So some of our people said, okay, we've been here for 1,000 years. We're going to move further south and reestablish our Kana civilization. We did that in today's Ghana and Ivory Coast, in those regions, and continue our Akan civilization for another 1,000 years up into this very day. So the civilizations never cease. The Oyo Empire and that of the Igbo and so forth, and Fon people coming out of the Oyo Empire, and a number of different groups. We continued that civilization unbroken all the way up until today, thousands of years. Now, we talked about that crown. We talked about going further south in Napata and Mero and so forth. One of the divinities that we mentioned in the promo for the show is the lion Jata divinity Apedemak, a war divinity, a war, Obosom and so forth, and he will wear that triple crown dealing with war. The same crown that you see Darius wearing, kings of ancient Kamit wearing. Here's another connection. That crown is called the Hem crown. Hem or HM means war or war cry, to roar, to be bellicose or boisterous, but a roar, raging, a war cry. And then the crown itself is called the Hem crown, the triple crown with the horns of the ram and Wachet and Nekabet, the cobras on both ends, and it's a crown dealing with war and going into war and victory and so forth. If you look in the language of the Akan, you'll be able to vocalize how do they spell HM in ancient Kamit. If you look in the Akan language, you find that Hama means to cry, to rage, to roar. And they'll talk about, for example, the ocean as it's making its noise, it's raging and roaring and so forth. Hama in Akan is the Hem in ancient Kamit, that war cry, that warrior crown. So you'll see Apedemak, the lion-headed divinity, wearing that war crown, and he's waging war against the enemy. So we're going to read something from this divinity. This is a major divinity connected with Khanat or Nubia in general. You'll find that many people all over the continent are connected to the lion and lioness, which is a major animal totem, or Achinebwa. People all over the continent. This is going back to ancient times. So we're going to read a quick section during the period of Meru, the people in ancient Khanit built temples to Apedemak. One of his inscriptions says, "You are greeted, Apedemak, the great God, the Lion of the South, strong of arm, the one who carries the secret concealed in his being, who is a companion for men and women, the one who hurls his hot breath against the enemy. You are called great of power, the one who punishes all who commit crimes against him, who gives to those who call him Lord of life." So that same ancestral totem that we had back then, same ancestral totem that we have now, this is a divinity, wages war against the enemy, destroys the enemy. Ancestral divinity carried in our blood circles from ancient Khanit, Khanat, to the western part of the continent, even carried by our people here. Some people will see that animal totem when they're engaged in ritual practice, in their dreams and so forth, as well as others. You can trace them back to these ancient times and see the same divinities with the same function and so forth. When we're talking about reestablishing culture, reestablishing Nanasom, talking about purification, we're not talking about purification with regard to cleansing with water and coolness and healing in that sense. Our purification is dealing with fire, with striking, waging war, burning up impurities, and burning up our enemies so that we can restore order to our civilization, to our people, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. So when it's talking about Apedemak, the war divinity, wearing the hem crown or the war cry crown, the hama crown, waging war and so forth, and he's a companion to men and women. He's a greater power, punishing all who commit crime, and hurls his hot breath against the enemy. Greater power, this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about the reestablishment of Nanasom. When we say Nanasom is rising, it's like fire rising, burning. We're talking about burning up our enemies and restoring our civilization. We're talking about purification through the Akan, purification through the ODWIRA, purification through the fire of the sun, burning up anything in our path that is out of harmony with disorder. This is the purification we talk about when we say OHA purification operationalizes Nanasom. When we talk about the incorporation of law, we're talking about Ma'a and Ma'at, the male and female force of divine law and balance. When we talk about the restoration of order, we're talking about Heru Behudet, Sechima, and the other lion-headed divinities that wage war, divine hate, destroying disorder and its purveyors. So you'll see these lion divinities, lioness divinities. You see Tefnut, she's called the Eye of Ra, she is the head of a lioness. You see Sechima Sekhmet, she's called the Eye of Ra, she is the head of a lioness. You'll see Mahet, you'll see Apedemak, you'll see a number of different divinities who are lion divinities. Sometimes Bastet will have that lion head and so forth. Eye of Ra, the sun disk on the head. We're talking about purification and destruction through fire. This is what we're dealing with. Now, so we just want to check the chat room real quick, and if anybody has any questions on the phone line, hit the number 1. Want to make sure we didn't miss any questions or comments in the chat room. Okay, and it looks like some of the other information. Okay, so you're just giving, somebody's giving some instructions on how to possibly straighten out that situation. All right, so there are only 15 minutes left within the broadcast. We probably won't have to go into any overtime, but if you want to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you would have to call in. Call in number 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. Okay, so now again, when we're talking about OHA or purification, we're talking about when you have the purified understanding of the culture, Amammere, that also has to do with knowledge of the philosophy of the culture. We're not talking about philosophical, narratives and people just trying to engage in intellectual nonsense. The actual grounding in the culture. Amammere in Akan language means, bere means a way or a manner. Amain means the nation. The way, bere, of the Amain, the nation of the people, is Amammere. That's the term for culture. The culture is rooted in the ancestral religion, as we said. It is animated by the ancestral religion. And of course, the ancestral religion is dealing with us attuning to the forces of nature that undergird order. We align with that order and replicate that order in every aspect of our lives. Divine order, as we have shown on previous shows, is composed of divine law, which is the same word as love. Law and love is the same word. Divine law and divine hate. You incorporate things, objects, deeds, and entities that you need to incorporate through law, and you reject things, objects, deeds, and entities you need to reject through hate. Law is the expression of order. Hate is the impression of order. Through law, you incorporate certain things that you need to harmonize your thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. Through hate, repulsion, that force of divine repulsion, you reject or you repel, you hate those things, objects, deeds, and individuals and entities that you need to reject in order to maintain balance and restore balance to your system. You impress or imprint the divinely established order on creation through divine hate. Therefore, you stamp it. You reject everything else, and you imprint that divine order. That's the impression of order, while law is the expression of order. So when you're talking about purification, you have to deal with both. If you're not dealing with divine law and divine hate, the expansive and contractive poles of order, the expression and the impression of order, then you're only dealing, if you're trying to only focus on law, divine law, and say, well, we're just about divine law and love and order, and that conquers all. That's nonsense. Through law, you learn what to incorporate. Through hate, you learn what to reject. You can deal with law. You can have your circulatory system, and when you drink and eat and breathe, and you pull in various nutrients, and they go into your bloodstream, and your bloodstream separates out those things that you need and takes the minerals and takes the vitamins and everything else, fuels your body and so forth. It's pulling in things. It's incorporating things that you need through the breath, through the liquids, through the food. But then your immune system rejects the things that you do not need. It destroys the bacteria that came in with the food that otherwise would destroy you. It destroys toxins, it purges things, it purges the waste and everything else. So you need to incorporate through breathing, through consumption, but you also need to reject, to destroy, or otherwise you would not survive. If somebody said, well, we just want to deal with law or love or incorporation and that's going to conquer all, we don't need an immune system, then everything collapses. Of course, the white narrow spring wants you to engage in that kind of nonsense. So when people don't understand that philosophy, that real culture, yet they call themselves Afrocentric. They're really not Afrocentric. In reality, they're Halfrocentric. They're only dealing with half of the problem. It's not Afrocentrism, it's Halfrocentrism. If you're not dealing with divine hate because you've been taught to reject hate, and hate is an emotion and all this other nonsense, and there are actual deities, male and female, of divine hate, and hate is in their name, literally. If you don't understand that, you're only dealing with half of divine order. If you think you're functioning, so you're a Halfrocentric. If you think you're dealing with divine law, and you talk about Ma'at all day long. Why? Because the whites in our spring talk about Ma'at all day long, and they philosophize about Ma'at, and they intellectualize foolishly about Ma'at. But they don't talk about the male divinity, Ma'at. If you don't know who he is, because you're not invoking him and learning directly from him, you don't know that you need to invoke both of them equally. And again, even if you just focused on Ma'at, but you have no consciousness of Ma'at, because the white narrow spring didn't raise you that way, but you think you're an Afrocentrist, you're still a Halfrocentric. You're engaged in Halfrocentrism. rejecting one half of divine law simply because the whites in our offspring didn't teach you and direct you to embrace that. Even further, you'll deal with philosophy and ethics, but you won't deal with invoking the female divinity herself and learning directly from her. How can you talk about Ma'at and talk about how she functions in creation and undergirds order and everything else? What have you learned directly from her that you can share with the people from her? An Akan person can tell you exactly what the Obosom that communicates with them, possesses them, has taught, shown them, and taught them. Whether it's through ritual, somebody Obosom for possessing, or at a shrine or whatever. A Yoruba person who's engaged in real culture can tell you what did the Orisha say when they possessed, when they spoke through divination. What does a Negro look like talking about Ma'at all day long, and all they can talk about is what they've read about Ma'at from typically white writers, and recasting what they found from white writers, or looking at some, oral traditions that were written, very often by the whites in our offspring, but some by our people on the continent, linking up some of those aspects of philosophy with what they found in Kamit, and trying to put those together and say, okay, now we're going to talk about Ma'at. Yet you don't talk about the divinity. That's not how our people established culture. They weren't sitting around reading a few things, writing a few things out, and sitting around philosophizing and preaching. They invoked the divinity, learned from the divinity, and shared that information with the community. And then, of course, the divinity would share the information intergenerationally as well. During ritual days, ritual festivals, and so forth, ritual times of the year, the Obosom comes forth, possesses, and communicates with the people, and gives direct information. So number one, people talk about Ma'at, but they don't talk about Ma'al. So you cut yourself off from half of divine law already. You're a Afrocentric. And then when you talk about Ma'at, you talk about ethics and the expression of her functions in creation, the results of her functioning in creation. On the other hand, you don't talk directly to her, because deep down inside you've been taught that your culture is inferior and you don't even recognize the reality that she exists and can be communicated with. You think she doesn't exist, and she's just a philosophy, because you've been enamored by the whites in your offspring. You're enamored with them. So you've cut yourself off from half of that as well. So you're Afrocentric. How can somebody be talking about ancient Kamit and Amen and Amen-Ra and so forth, and never mention Amenet one time? You cut yourself off from half of the created universe if you talk about Amen and you don't talk about Amenet, number one. And then if you mention her name simply because you've seen her name and said, oh, well, all the gods had a goddess with them, so there was a male and female balance, tell us what Amenet told you directly, and how that informs your practice, informs your understanding of culture, and how you transmit that knowledge to your progeny and to your community. Because if you can't do that, then you're a Afrocentrist once again. How can you talk about Ra and not talk about Ra'et? Not simply talking about her in the sense of there's a name, Ra'et, and it means, energy. What has Ra'et directly communicated with you? These are things we teach our children, and they learn that before puberty and onward in all of our various cultures. It is the whites and offspring who sought to take agency away from the Obosom, agency away from the divinities, make you believe that they didn't exist, because it's a matter for them of national security. If they invade your country, take over your country, and are ruling it, they can't have you in a position where you can go into your house and they're outside, the military is walking around or whatever, they think they have you scared and under control. All you have to do is go in your house, sit in front of a sculpture. The Obosom takes up residence in the sculpture, directs you as to how to kill the whites in their offspring, when is the best time to strike, when their shipment of new arms are coming in, when you can strike that shipment and get those new arms and wage war against these people, when they are falling asleep, when a certain guard is falling asleep, or a certain, military personnel is going to fall asleep or move into a certain direction, or when they're engaged in criminal activity and they're not paying attention. All you have to do is learn directly from the Obosom in the privacy of your home when to strike, how to strike, and move forward. They can't have you having those kinds of conversations because they want to continue to rule you. So they have to make you believe there are no deities. Any spirit that you listen to that is not the fictional cartoon character Jesus is just a demon or something that's in your mind psychologically. If you're in the Western Hemisphere, and you're studying sociology and psychology and so forth, that tell you you're having tactile hallucinations and you're just, reliving things from your past and it's your imagination and you need some medication and all this other nonsense. What you need to understand is the whites and offspring have been moving this program for the past couple of thousand years. It has not been successful until the last couple of hundred years in certain areas, especially in the Western Hemisphere. So because they see that as a matter of national security, this is why they promote these fake religions. To take agency away from the deities in your mind, only will listen to them. And you will fear listening to or even believing or recognizing that you can listen to anything else. So once they do that and they're successful with that, then they can control all of your movement. Fill your head with that philosophy and so forth. So therefore, you come up as a pseudo-scholar, linguist, historian, pseudo-spiritualist, talking about atheism and all kinds of nonsense, and deified ancestors and, philosophy and everything is just symbolic, and these are just deeper symbolisms, and Orisha are just symbolic, anthropomorphized aspects of Ashe, and they're really not real forces in nature. Only idiots talk in that kind of language, and they are aping the crimes of the whites and their offspring, that criminal activity, that criminal mode of the whites and their offspring. That's what they're doing. So we need to move away from Afrocentrism. If you want to call yourself something, if you want to embrace Afrocentrism, embrace it fully. It would be best to simply identify yourself as who you actually are, which is Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit. Afura is the name of Ra when he's moving through matter. Ka means soul, but Ka also means the first raised land. That's irrefutable. And of course, Negroes who don't understand cosmology and haven't studied, the whites and their offspring have taught them to study, and the manner in which they taught them to study, they haven't investigated the information. So they want to believe that that's not who we are. But when you understand who Afura is and who Ka and Ka'et is, these two divinities, and Afura'et, every time you say Afuraka, you are invoking Ra and the divinity Ka. Every time you say Afuraitkaitnut, you're invoking the divinity, the goddess Ka'et, and the goddess Afuraitkaitnut. Then you're actually identifying yourself, stimulating your Afu, your flesh. You're stimulating your Ba, your divine living energy that comes from Ra and Ra'at. You're stimulating your Ka, your soul, your divine consciousness, as well as your melanin body. So we only have less than a minute in the show left. We're going to finish it here. Yedate for everyone tuning in to our 100th show. Please support we have free books. All of our 16 books publications are free downloads from our website. We also have the softcover versions. Please support those. And also support our business of the week, tiwantiwa.webs.com, Tiwan Tiwa, Ibibimai Village. And we will be back on next week. We'll be back on tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow. We'll send out a notification for that. And we'll get into some more with regard to the economic development model and operation, where we're targeting one business per week for 52 weeks. This is week number 4, Tiwan Tiwa, Ibibimai Village, owned by Iya Naila Sankofa, African Center Village that they're establishing in the Austin area, independent community in the Austin area. Please support that business, tiwantiwa.webs.com. When you go to the Aakhuamu page, then you will see all the lists of the businesses, including Tiwan Tiwa. Starve the beast, take those funds from the whites and their offspring, make that assessment this week, decide I'm not going to waste money on products and drinks and things like that at restaurants and convenience stores and gas stations. with the White Nile Spring, I'm going to take those funds, starve that white beast, and reallocate them to the business of the week to support a black business, an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business. So go to the Okom page, to the list of businesses, or go directly to tiwantiwa.webs.com, tiwantiwa.webs.com. Make your donation to Iya Naila Sankofa's business, and we will be back on tomorrow for Aakhuamu, dealing more with the Aakhuamu economic development, as well as just Egua Marketplace Day in general. Again, Yerase for everyone who has been supporting our shows up to this point and sharing these, sharing the broadcast, sharing the archive, sharing the information with everyone, sharing the publications and so forth. This is the first set of 100, and we are working on embarking upon the next set of 100 broadcasts. So Yerase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebe Shiabio, we will meet again. That's up.